Today in the Leader Seat, we have Maika Isogawa, founder and CEO of Webacy, the company that is at the forefront of developing tools and services to help you protect your digital assets for the unexpected. She graduated from Stanford University, was part of Cirque du Soleil, and was recently recognized on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list for 2022. Maika, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to jump right into it. I was on Twitter last night and your name popped up. So I went on your Twitter and I saw something that you tweeted that I have to bring up, talk to you about. You said, not dating makes you a 10X founder. And that's all it said. Talk to me about that.
It's just funny because I've thought about Twitter quite a bit because I think being a founder in the space and also being in Web3, it's where a lot of the news comes up and it's where you kind of keep a pulse on the ecosystem. And so I got back into Twitter when I founded the company, when I founded Webacy in 2021, and have since not really put too much effort into building a Twitter audience. I use it more for ingestion. But I tried here and there to create really valuable threads on crypto research and all the things I'm reading that are quite interesting that I want to share. And that just did so poorly. And all the things that are immediate little shower thoughts or things you think about when you're doing something dumb just seem to be doing very well. And the tweet last night was one of those things. And so here we are.
Perfect. So I want to start from the beginning. You were born in Tokyo, moved to Minnesota at a young age. Tell me about your childhood and upbringing.
Yeah, so you got it. I was born in Tokyo. I was born in a little town called Musashi Kogane, which is around a 40-minute train ride from central Tokyo. And I grew up there. My mother's American, my father's Japanese. So kind of, both cultures growing up at the same time. I moved to Minnesota when I was around 4 or 5. And then went back and forth over the years until I was around 10. And so I had a very multicultural upbringing, very diverse upbringing, and it's definitely made me part of who I am today.
So I mentioned in the earlier, you graduated from Stanford, and then you made the decision to take a leave of absence from Stanford, because I also mentioned earlier you were part of Cirque du Soleil, and that's the reason why you left Stanford. What made you want to do that? What made you make that decision to, I want to leave one of the top universities in the country to go on travel?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that go into a life-altering decision like that. First is that there was kind of a safety net coming along with it because Stanford lets you take up to 2 years off, I believe, total without having to reapply. And so in one sense, I could try with no real repercussions of losing my spot, quote unquote, at one of the top universities. So that was one. Number two is I got the offer to work professionally in the circus world. Basically right out of high school. It was 3 months into my time at Stanford. And at that point, if you remember being young, it seems like years ago for me, you're at your peak physical energy levels and physical performance levels. And so I knew that it was kind of now or never. If I were to stay at school for another 4 years and then try after that, it was never going to happen. So It was a combination of timing, good luck, opportunity that wouldn't come again, kind of striking the iron while it's hot.
Were you scared of what might happen when you come back?
Come back to school?
Yeah, like when you just came back to your normal life, were you scared of what might happen for taking that leave of absence?
I think that's one of the best things about being young is you don't really have the fears that you might have when you have perspective when you're older. No, fear is not part of that equation.
I come from immigrant parents. I was born in Iran, and you come from immigrant parents, obviously. Did your parents support this move? Sometimes, immigrant parents are a little harsher on making drastic decisions like that.
Absolutely not.
No?
I would say they're incredibly supportive of me, but they also have my best wishes and my safety in mind. And being an aerialist acrobat is not the safest job, nor is it the most stable job in terms of income. And so, staying at Stanford, graduating, getting a good job, that's a very solid and straightforward path, which I think that they were comfortable with. So they did support me, but they did have some concerns in the very beginning.
How did you go about convincing them?
I don't think they'd been able to tell me what to do since I was a pretty young kid. And I wasn't like a bad kid by any means, but if I wanted to do something, I pretty much did it.
Do you think that's something why you're successful now? Do you think because that personality plays a role in you being a great CEO?
I think it allows me to challenge things and to pursue things that people may not choose to pursue. Success, I'm not sure if we've gotten to the point of success yet, but we're working on it.
You're getting there. I look at our lives, they're a bunch of puzzle pieces. How do you think the major decision of you making that decision to go to Stanford, let's say you didn't leave the Stanford, let's say you stayed, how would have that changed or maneuvered your life that you're living now?
I love thinking back on our life paths and choices like this, because in hindsight, you see all of these weird things that happen that end up catapulting you into different directions, right? And I think Cirque was one of those things. So when I originally joined Stanford, I wanted to be an astrophysicist. I grew up watching a lot of those crazy space shows on like History Channel and all this stuff. So I was a physics major. I was studying hard science, and my move to Cirque actually kind of opened me up, met a lot of entrepreneurs, met a lot of technologists, a lot of people who were building businesses too, kind of inspired me to want to take a different path. So when I came back to school, I switched to kind of the more entrepreneurial, supportive majors like symbolic systems, computer science, stuff that you could kind of leave school and either find a job or join a startup, found a startup, and so on. So I think it's incredibly impactful for where I am today. I don't know if I'd be the same person if I am today without those choices.
Yeah. Do you have any siblings?
I have a brother, older brother.
Okay. And how is he dealing with all these situations with you as a CEO?
I think it's kind of chaotic, maybe for my family in general, but my
older
brother,
or younger brother?
He's older. He's older by quite a bit, 6 years.
Okay.
But I have the best brother ever. He's incredibly kind and supportive, and he is my sounding board when it comes to like hard days and so on. So really nice to have a sibling in life in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't know how that feels. I'm an only child. So so in February 2016, you flew to Japan, Cirque du Soleil. Were there any moments during your time away from school that you thought you didn't want to go back and this is what you wanted to do for the rest of your life?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I was caught up in it. When I joined the circus world, I was 18. And so it was kind of my first time away from home, first time away from family and so on. And so I wasn't really thinking too far ahead, to be honest. But yeah, the job itself is so fun. It's incredibly challenging and demanding, but it's incredibly fun because other than your job, you're kind of free, right? You're performing in front of thousands of people. They love it. You're creating something that isn't necessarily that they can necessarily experience in their everyday lives. And so the job is incredibly rewarding. And the people that I worked with were sometimes twice my age. So there's definitely a career that you could work that far. But for me personally, I had a lot of other interests too. And so I ended up going back to school once the 2-year Stanford period went up. And so I was at my contract end and it just kind of made sense and the timing was right.
Were you a gymnast when you were younger, or is that something you just picked up as?
No, it was a hobby. So in Minnesota, funny enough, one of the largest youth circuses in America is in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so I did that growing up after school.
So traveling, can teach you a lot, especially the way you did it. I'm sure it taught you even more. What are some valuable lessons you think you learned while traveling, being part of the group?
This is a great question too. Traveling alone gives you perspective on the world that you wouldn't otherwise have if you never left your home country, right? Like every culture is so different. And particularly, I think, especially if you grew up in like a Western world, like America, going to Asia, especially Japan. And I want to promote Japan because Japan travel is just the best in the world. It changes your perspective, not only about yourself, your own like things you're selfish about, the way you live, the things you know to be true in your own life are totally different somewhere else. So yeah, travel is probably one of the best things you can do for individual personal growth.
When was the first time you traveled back to your home country as an adult? Where you kind of like, it hit you where you were like, oh, wow, things are not this or things are different here than that. Like, where was a culture shock?
I'm pretty grateful to my parents because they took me back so regularly that I wouldn't say there's culture shock either way. I think as a half Japanese, half American, there's always this question. Some people ask, like, do you feel more one or the other? And there's more half Japanese kids that I've been able to talk to about identity and so on. But luckily, I feel quite ingrained in both. And though I don't fit squarely in one category, I think it's actually a benefit.
Are you trying to implement the company Webacy in the Eastern world?
Absolutely. So yeah, we are an American-based company, but crypto was just what we kind of specialize in is blockchain-based assets, since that's where a lot of the money is right now, and like value associated with tangible digital assets. We're based in the US, but crypto is very global. And so already just by nature of things, we're international, and Asia and in the East, they have really taken quite a storm with it. And so that's definitely a part of our roadmap.
So there's a quote that I love by Eleanor Roosevelt that says, learn from the mistakes of others. You can't live long enough to make them all yourself. You have spoken on something very close to this, the reasons to do things you're told not to do. As children, as even adults, we're always told some not to do because there's always someone that thinks they know more than we do. During your early 20s, was there something specific that stands out that you were told not to do, that if you listened to that, that would have changed everything and you wouldn't have ever been a founder of Webacy?
Ooh, this is a tough question. And I love that quote. You said Eleanor Roosevelt?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to flag that for later. I did a lot of things that I was told not to do, not to bring gender and race into it, but being a female, young, ambitious, growing up, especially even in Minnesota, and it's a very white kind of homogenous society. And so you're kind of, people want to pigeonhole you into where they think you're going to go. Right. So if someone says, hey, so actually strikingly, this is from not my early 20s, but when I was younger, it was gym class, right? I don't know why I still remember this, but we were climbing a rope. And because of my circus acrobatic background, I knew how to climb a rope, but none of the other girls could. And so someone asked me, hey, could you stop climbing to the top so the rest of us don't look good? And I just thought that was ridiculous. Like, why ask someone else to reduce themselves so just that you feel better about yourself? And so instead of doing that, I kept climbing to the top and then later offered to teach others. After, if they wanted to learn how to climb a rope. Because if you know the technique, it's a lot easier. So anyways, that's kind of stuck with me because people will try to bring you down to make themselves feel better. And that's never something that I want to promote or support in any way.
Nice. And looking back at the other end of the stick, how do you determine as an entrepreneur, when is it a good time to listen to the don't do that? I don't think that's a good route to go down.
I think our instincts are very powerful. Even as an acrobat, right? When you're doing physical work and your body just tells you don't do this, or something in your gut's telling you don't do this, there's a reason for that, right? So we have this reptile brain that's evolved over hundreds of millions of years to tell you when things are dangerous, when things aren't the right thing to do. And I think that's actually very valuable. It's something we could listen to more often.
You brought up being a female as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, is obviously trials and tribulations. What are some things that you came across that you didn't expect? You were like, really? I've heard about this. I didn't think it was going to be like this.
Yeah, I think I've been very lucky to be surrounded by incredibly supportive people all around the industry. So I think I've been a little bit sheltered from a lot of what I've heard, but it's definitely the things you hear about being a female founder or women in tech is definitely true. Just the other day, I read that in 2022, the amount of women receiving venture capital funding, or the total amount of VC funding raised by female founded companies, was only like 1.9%. Wow. Which is less than the 2.4-ish. I think those numbers are right. Don't quote me on that. From 2021. So it's actually gotten lower, and it's the worst since around 2015, 2016. So we're not trending in the right direction. And me being a female founder who has raised a significant amount of VC funding, I don't see that. Yes, it was difficult, but I don't know how difficult it is me versus a male founder because I'm not a male founder. So I just know the numbers of what's been announced, and it's just not the direction we should be moving in.
What do you think will it take for us to move towards the right direction? I feel like this is a conversation that's been happening for so long, and it's like the world is moving forward so much with technology and everything. You would think that these things would kind of catch up and we kind of would go past that. Why is this not working out? Is it the way we're raised? Is it the way our parents are raising us? Is it going to take multiple generations for it to be changed? What is it?
And I think good things definitely take time. It's already taken this much time for, women to get voting rights, right? And so we're trending in general in the right direction. But even for us, for example, me living in the United States, where women are the most free out of all the countries, we still don't feel like it's enough. And so there's this fallacy that no matter how far we go, there's still going to be more to traverse, right? But that's part of the journey and part of the work we have to put into it. I also have another hot take about venture funding, if I can share it. Since I had a lot of VC friends and spoken to a lot of VCs, there seems to be something along the lines of pattern matching within the venture capital world of funding founders that have been successful before. And historically, the founders that have been successful before are white male founders. And so it's just part of data. It's part of history. And you can't really blame investors for following this because it's what is known to be successful. But until we see more other kinds of people being successful, that's not going to change, right? And so it's a combination of both consciously giving people new opportunities that may have not had it before, but also opening yourself up not to pattern match as the only signal for a positive investment.
Do you think, as a young entrepreneur, as an immigrant, the America's land of the free, where you come and opportunities are there? I think you're at the perfect age where you kind of got the experience where America was very different to where it is now, and that's changed. Have you seen a change when you were younger till now? Is that still a fact? Is that because I feel like it might be shifting a little bit?
I think culturally it might be shifting. I think people are realizing that other cultures have a lot to offer when it comes to lessons and when it comes to entertainment. Like Asia is exploding right now, both from pop culture to everything from pop culture to tech, right? And so tides are turning, and I think the West is starting to feel that and starting to realize that like we're not all hot shit here, like people like to think.
Yeah.
Pardon my language. Yeah, and when I was growing up, like I guess there's like the 2008 economic collapse that happened that I was probably too young to really understand. And now we're kind of feeling the dregs of that again, like another recession, if you want to call it that. And so we'll see. But it's totally natural for ebbs and flows of economies to move. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see where this lands.
Very interesting. In the past, you've created something that I found so fascinating when I saw. So I went through your blog. I went and read every single blog you've ever posted. And you created a challenge, 12 challenges in 12 months. You did it in 2018, 19, 20, and 21. I thought that was amazing. Would you consider yourself a competitive person?
Well, first of all, thank you for reading everything. I probably have some really embarrassing things in there that you came across. Yes, 100%. Yes. If that's not clear enough in the things I choose to tackle, yes. Probably most competitive with myself more than others. So.
All right. And something else that I came across, you love coffee. You love Starbucks, and you actually have lots of respect for the business and the success of the company. So when you started creating your own business, did you study other successful companies that you looked up to, such as Starbucks? And if so, what is that you learned from them?
I have followed a lot of successful companies, like a lot of wannabe young entrepreneurs probably have, but I definitely haven't studied them as much as I probably should have. Like learning from the mistakes of others is something I still need to, read up on and figure out so I don't make the same mistakes. But particularly with Web3 and with crypto security and the areas that we're working in, there kind of isn't a playbook out there. There's definitely general themes that you can learn from other companies and other entrepreneurs that have been through it. But it feels a little bit like the Wild West in a very good way. And so both taking mentorship from people who have done it before while also paving a new path. It's a bit of both.
So since you love coffee so much, have you ever thought about opening a coffee shop?
That sounds a good dream. I would love that. But you know how sometimes your hobbies, when you make it into a job, they don't become enjoyable anymore? Yeah. Maybe that might be what happens. So for now,
it's like when they say don't ever meet your like celebrity that you're like look up to, because that could just ruin everything for you, for all the movies and everything.
Exactly. Are you a coffee drinker?
I'm more of a tea drinker, but I think I've transitioned into coffees ever since I moved to America.
Yeah.
February 2017. Do you recall what challenge you gave yourself that month?
Not at all. Not at all. What was it?
So it was spend no money.
Oh,
When I read that, I was like, I have to talk to you about this. It's so funny, especially nowadays in our generation. It's like if you tell someone you can't spend money on this food, we'll say that you said besides food, obviously, they would think it's physically impossible to do. I think this is such a fun challenge, and I'm sure it taught you a lot. What did it teach you?
It teaches you that you have way more than you think you do. So for example, it's kind of unfair because, for example, I have a bike already, right? Like if someone doesn't have a bike, then they have to walk everywhere. You can't take the bus because that costs money unless you want to just jump on the bus and not pay, which everyone does in San Francisco, apparently. But it teaches you a lot about being resourceful and just using what you have. So even on the food side, if you look at your pantry, you probably have a ton of food in there that you could eat, like rice, lentils, beans, whatever is in there that you don't need to buy lunch to feed yourself. And so it was a very fun month. I didn't buy anything new, which was great because I have everything I need already. And so it teaches you a lot about not needing stuff.
Did you keep track of how much money you saved by not spending money?
It was mostly keeping track, so I track my expenses every month. And so I know that I spend zero versus what I spend every month otherwise. And so the difference is there.
What was the biggest struggle you came across?
I think spending time with friends. Usually social events are either drinks or like seeing a movie, stuff like that. But you just kind of choose alternatives.
Yeah. The infamous line, "Does money bring you happiness?" I think you're more than capable of answering this question since you went a whole month without spending money. Do you think you found the answer?
I think there are a lot of other things that can bring you happiness. Little things, fulfillment. Money is necessary for things like living. And so there's like a baseline necessity there. But I think our benchmark for what will make us happy is a lot lower than we all think.
Yeah. I'm going to mention a number and I'm sure it's going to click in your head exactly what it is. $86,400.
I think I know what it is, but please jog
so you mentioned in a world of chasing money, I'm chasing time. Since your journey as a founder and a CEO of a company, how are you chasing time? And for the audience that doesn't know, I guess you can go ahead and explain what that number means.
I believe it's, is it hours, days?
It's seconds. 86,400 seconds. Yeah.
That's right. And so I think there's a couple different books and resources that talk about length of lifetime or time you have left. And even at my company, Webacy, part of the philosophy of where we started from was talking about our lifespans and recognizing that our lives are short and limited and that we should make the most of that. And so I kind of live my day-to-day like this. We actually built a Chrome plugin that every time you open a new tab, it shows you how many weeks you have left to live or days you have left to live. And I find this both terrifying, but also very powerful in the way you spend your time. Because I've started tracking how much time I spend on my phone on social media. And if you look back at your week and look at 5 hours spent on social media, that's horrifying. I don't want to spend 5 hours a week over the whole year. That's a huge number. If you think about it, scrolling through Instagram. Yeah. And so I think it's a powerful tool to motivate yourself.
So in a day of age where technology, AI, everyone has access to it and everyone's looking up to be an entrepreneur nowadays, I feel like. But as you know, it's most of the time easier said than done. A lot of people, they want to be entrepreneurs, they get motivated, they start something and then they hit a roadblock and boom, they just stop. Being someone that has gone through the process, I'm sure things got difficult at times. What made you be the CEO that kept going and didn't stop?
Yeah, I think challenges are the biggest roadblocks when building a company. And I think for me and for a lot of people, all we hear about is successes for the most part of entrepreneurs. I think I don't know the numbers, but 90% of companies fail, something along the lines of that. And a very small percentage actually make it big. And those are the companies we hear about. So we expect things to work out. We expect things to kind of, be successful for ourselves. And so when things are hard or when things take a lot more time than we thought, it's easy to get demotivated. But I think for me, the key has been working on something that's really important to me and important to the space. And then also working with a team that's equally motivated and responsible to one another and to themselves for getting the job done. So those factors have kept things going, but also it's just we're building something super cool and impactful. So that's nice to see too.
It's funny because in society, negativity is publicized so much. Like in the news, if you open up the news app in the morning, it's all negative, not so much positive. But when it comes to the success of entrepreneurs, it's the opposite. You only hear about the positive and don't hear about the negative and the downsides. And do you feel like that doesn't teach the right way to the upcoming entrepreneurs where they just hear the positive and never hear about the negatives?
I think it's great to see both sides of the story. I think entrepreneurs, people who want to be entrepreneurs tend to look into it a little bit more, maybe read some of the books and see that there are the struggles, the failures and so on, the ones that are really trying to. So yeah, I think it's great to show both sides. And in the news too, I don't really watch local news, first of all, because I don't have a TV, but also it's just really sad. And so I do like to see a balance of the news from good and bad. Like if you look at Japanese news, it's actually really good balance. They do have significantly less crime to report upon, but like world events, they balance the negative world events with a lot of positive stuff going on within the country too. And so I think there's something you can learn from that.
Yeah, for sure. So you're a lady of many traits. You wrote a poetry book called Intrigue. Can you speak about that? Because actually, even in reading your blogs, you're a very good writer. Was that something you were always good at? Is that something you found out you were good at? Was it kind of like a therapy to maybe write a book or write a blog?
I think so. I think any kind of creative expression is very therapeutic in many ways. Thank you for saying I was good at it. But yeah, so funny enough, some of the projects on my website, like the blog, music, everything that's on there, majority of it was actually from when I tore my ACL. So I'm a very physically active person. And so I work out every day, that kind of thing. But when I tore and got my surgery for my ACL, I had a very long recovery time. So I had a lot of free time. And so this is where a lot of those projects came from.
Got it. And you mentioned music. Actually, my background, I started with music. I played the violin and I got into music production. So when I saw you did music, I thought that was really cool. Your artist name, I have no idea how to pronounce it. I don't want to butcher it. Say it.
Do I try? It's Hiza.
Hiza? Okay. I was going to say Hiza. And my favorite song actually.
Way cooler. I should just go with that.
Hiza?
Yeah. It's like SZA, but not.
And one of my favorites, I actually went and listened to the music, and Catch Me If You Can is actually pretty good. So you definitely have something there. What is the reason why you started the music? Because
I knew you found something embarrassing. I put them at the bottom of the list so people
that's
wouldn't
not
find it.
But see, let's talk about that. Why, to me, like that's not embarrassing. It shouldn't be looked at as embarrassing, right? It's a talent and creative side of you that a lot of other entrepreneurs don't have. And part of Leader Seed and what we like try to put out there is help leaders bring out their creativity to achieve their potential, like full potential. And I think you being a writer and having a poetry book and having music background, I think those things have taught you so much that you probably don't realize maybe on your day to day. Has that taught you a lot by being creative and being multi-talented?
Probably pretty likely. They say that people who study music, and you probably know too, have a different area of their brain unlocked, or it's kind of like learning another language that really teaches you a lot about all kinds of things. Like music theory is a thing that's almost very mathematic, right? And so I think having a musical upbringing was very powerful for me. So I grew up playing piano. I went to a music conservatory for high school. Actually, I went to an arts conservatory. So that's why I learned a little bit of production, a little bit of writing, that kind of thing. But yeah, no, I think that having not necessarily hobbies, but I think of it almost as cross training. I like when you train like lifting to become a better runner or whatever you do, it's very much like that in our other softer skills too. And so I love to express myself in other creative ways and also execute upon projects that I start.
I'm sure you're too busy to even think about those things now, but have you ever, dipped back into it just for yourself, not even to post for anything, but just for yourself?
I want to. To be honest, the company is taking quite all of my attention, like by choice. But it's something that I have my keyboard right next to my desk here, nice. And so it's something that's available if needed. So
you've mentioned in the past that you study ancient thinkers, and I think that says a lot about you and your personality and your traits and who you are as a human being. A lot of people don't go back all the way that route. Can you speak on something that you learned by studying ancient thinkers and that has impacted your success as an entrepreneur?
Definitely. So I see the bust behind you too, so I appreciate that. But I got really into Stoicism when I was working for Cirque du Soleil, both as like a tool and also just a personal interest to read more philosophy. And so I think one big lesson I learned from Stoicism was kind of just the ability to disconnect, or not just disconnect, separate yourself from your emotions, rather than allowing yourself to be kind of swayed by them to maximum extent. And so when it comes to things that are going right or going wrong, within your control, out of your control, being able to separate those things and kind of think objectively about your path forward was very powerful along college, among my work, life, and in the future too. And so highly recommend if anyone is interested in picking up a philosophy book. Marcus Aurelius is a really good thinker in that space.
Nice. Webacy was first launched in 2021. I first want to go back to what I mentioned. I think we passed through it, the Forbes 30 under 30. Where were you when you first heard that? Like, I think that's a huge accomplishment as for someone that just launched a company to be recognized by Forbes.
Yeah, thank you. It was a huge surprise. It was kind of like not necessarily a goal, but a dream for many, many young people, I think, to be on that list. And for me, I just never thought that it wasn't like a focus of mine to get onto that list, but I knew I wanted to be, right? And so I knew it comes annually, but I actually didn't know the morning of that I had made the list. One of my team members said, "Oh my gosh, you made the list and sent it to me." And so that was a kind of a wild day for me personally, after years of seeing people on the list and being inspired by the people who are building companies there.
Do you connect with the people that are on the list? How does that work? For us that are past the age of 30 and won't make it on that list anymore, how does that work? Do you keep contact with the people, or is that not even a thing?
I'm pretty sure there's a 40 under 40. So there's
okay,
a list
there you
to
go.
be on.
Okay.
No, but yeah, they have they create like a group for you guys to all connect. A lot of people like to connect with each other on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and they have events that they host around the country and internationally too. I think there's international lists also. And so there's multiple ways to connect with each other, and everyone has been fantastic that I've met so far.
Nice. When you first started Webacy, do you remember the first person you hired?
Yes. Yeah, of course.
How was that feeling to be kind of on the other side? You know, you were getting hired your whole life, and now you're on the other side hiring someone. How was that feeling?
Well, it's tough because I would say more than hiring, it was more like getting someone officially on board.
Okay.
It's actually our current head of engineering. That was our first hire, quote unquote. And so it was kind of, at the time he was working full time for another company. So it was, how do you convince someone to leave a stable job to work on something that is unproven with a young team that's just hungry and wanting to change the world. And so I think I learned a lot from that experience. And since then the team has grown to 8 now. But it's totally different. I understand now from the other side, applying versus getting like hiring someone versus applying to a job, what the difference is. Because when I was in college, I had no idea. And now I know, and now I can help others be a little bit more thoughtful in the way they apply to get an opportunity.
Let's dive into that. Because, you know, as a student or going in, you're applying for a job, they're like, oh, they're going to ask this question. They're looking for this. They're looking for that. What are you looking for? And does it match exactly how it was when you were on the other end? Are you looking for the same things that we always thought they were looking for?
Probably not. I think, I mean, like our company, Webacy, is very small right now. So we're very specific in what we're looking for, right? Like people with this kind of experience, it's harder for us to hire, let's say, someone young with no experience because we just know what we need right now. As we grow, that'll change. But when I was in college, for example, I used to just apply to any job because I had no experience. And when they would ask, hey, do you have any questions about us? I made huge mistakes. I didn't look at the company beforehand. I didn't really know why I was applying to that job. I was just wanting a job for the summer. And so I think that kind of stuff is something that you learn over time just with age. But on the other side now, it's tough because you meet so many people who are excellent people and excellent candidates, maybe just not the right fit for the position you're trying to fill.
Yeah. Is your long-term goal to stay CEO of the company, or would you be looking to possibly, sell it off?
I mean,
I know it's too early in the game for you to answer that question, but it has to be something you have thought of at some point.
Yeah, I think every founder and investor team, right? You think about exit strategies, game plans, but for me, it's kind of just about making Webacy as impactful and big as possible, right? So that it affecting as many people as possible, securing as many assets as possible, getting as big as possible to protect the most amount of people as possible. That's what's on my mind. I know people always ask, what's your exit strategy? But right now, there's no room to think about it.
Yeah, I think you're so ahead of your like the time and what Webacy is and it provides that people are still maybe not understanding it fully. But once they do, they're going to see what you've created so early on. You're going to look back and be like, wow, she created this in 2021 and we're in 2030. Why didn't we take this serious? So the company started as a life counter, like you mentioned, and now it's transitioned to something a little different, digital assets and in social media also. Was that always the plan, or was the plugin the only thing you wanted to do at the time, or was it the plan to always grow and maneuver to something bigger and better?
Yeah, so I mean, the plugin was kind of a marketing / side project for me, for our team, to kind of just do something fun for user acquisition. But the company started with a crypto will, actually. So we are still very philosophically aligned with where we started, but the product and the services itself has adjusted to meet where the market is right now. We want to protect all digital assets, your digital identity, right? And this includes everything, if you think about it now, from your Instagram, your social media, all of your notes. But very importantly, people think a lot about money. So at the end of the day, when you pass away, what does your family care about? Of course, they care about you and the memory of you, but in a state, right? That's where people fight over. That's where hardship comes from. And so that's where we were tackling in the very beginning. So we created a crypto whale, which is still alive today in our product suite, but totally on-chain, blockchain native way to pass on your crypto assets. And then from there, the technology we realized was useful for way more. So expanded into security. We realized the security space needed immediate attention. And so this is kind of where the company shifted and adapted to meet the industry where it was. And so that's where the modern day Webacy is today.
So all the changes, when they're happening, what's going through your head? Because sometimes you might be thinking, oh, I'm making too many changes. That wasn't the goal of the company. Now I have to do this and do that just to go with technology. Was it overwhelming? Was it like, did you have to sit down and talk to other people to make sure it was the right decision to move that direction or move the company in a certain direction?
We had a lot of team syncs, kind of discussing like, what's working, what's not. And I think at such an early stage, you can't be so married to one specific thing when market signals are telling you that things are a little bit different. And so testing, changing, trialing different things is super important because you never know what's going to hit and what's not going to work. Because maybe the idea you are married to, maybe no one wants that. And so that's something like, it's a hard reality of being an entrepreneur. That's something you're building nobody wants, but it's an opportunity to find that next thing that people do need.
What has been the biggest challenge in describing what Webacy is to the layman, like the regular person on the street? Because sometimes when you bring up crypto, blockchain, I feel like it's like an hour conversation for them to understand what blockchain is. Has that been a challenge to kind of getting the regular person to understand what Webacy does?
You pretty much said it. I think something like 80% of people don't even know what crypto or blockchain really is. So that's a huge issue. The one big topic in the whole crypto industry right now is how we're going to on-ramp the next 100 million users into the space. And I think some big brands are doing a good job of doing that by abstracting away a lot of the technology that we need. So Instagram launching digital collectibles, which is actually NFTs, just with a better name, right, to reach those retail consumers. And so it's going to take time for the bulk people to move into the space, but when they do, they're going to need something like what we're building. And so that's what we're looking ahead for.
What do you think caused and I might be totally wrong because I'm not in the space. What do you think the hype of crypto kind of fell off? What do you think that was? What do you think caused that?
It's a combination of things, I think. So the crypto world has been in a cycle, like a cycle of ups and downs for a decade since it's been around. And so this is kind of just one piece of that cycle, and it's going to kind of dip back up. So not only is it just economic factors purely, but also in the space, if anyone's been looking at crypto news or just regular news, there's been a lot of bad actors in the space, both kind of mostly on the centralized side, like controlled entities, businesses themselves that have made mistakes or managed money poorly, things that could happen in Web 2, also in the traditional finance. It happened to happen in crypto because we're early and there's less regulation and there's less guardrails to protect from that. And so I think those things coupled with a harsh economic environment from VCs to traditional economics has, participated in the downturn, but it's all kind of part of this up and down ecosystem that we're in.
Do you think that COVID had a negative impact on crypto and blockchain? Because I feel like when we were locked down, people are not making money, people are not going to work. And all of a sudden now you have all these influencers that have NFTs, that have cryptos, that are pushing it on their platforms. Like, buy this NFT and you're going to become a millionaire. And everyone hasn't been working for over a year. So everyone's desperate. They do it. And then it blows up to this big thing. And then now it's like back to reality, right? Back to where crypto kind of was. It shifted back to where it was and it's slowly going back up. Do you think that COVID and mentality of people just being hungry and just wanting money so bad is what kind of affected it?
Yeah, I think when anthropologists look back to COVID, like 100 years from now, they're going to pull such wild, data pieces from what we're going through. I mean, obviously COVID affected everything. Yes, I think it affected crypto. I'm not necessarily sure how. I can see it more starkly in different industries. So for example, COVID, Cirque du Soleil had to halt all of their shows. Yeah. Everyone who was in a relationship went back and had babies. So they're all parents now, right? So that has changed. And maybe they're not going back to work. Maybe some are. And then in the fitness industry, people suddenly couldn't go to gyms and classes anymore. And so all of the online fitness apps, they exploded in popularity because people had no other options. So I think very similar things probably happened in crypto, and it was part of the 2021 bull run in crypto that we saw. But also it's hard to say. I can't wait to see what kind of analysis these college students will do like 20 years from now. For
sure. Let's go back to Webacy. The company's growing quickly. It's so quickly you don't even have time to do your challenges that you set yourself to do. Discuss the growth of the company in the last year and what's your goal for 2023?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned before, we grew from 2 people to 8 And then we have a few more part-timers, interns, and so on. We raised 2 rounds of funding, which I can't speak about yet, but we're going to announce this quarter, which is very exciting. We've launched a couple different products and had more than, I believe the numbers at 10,000 messages sent out from our most recent product recently. A ton of value protected under our assets. And so 2023, we have a lot going on the radar. So a lot of really important partnerships coming up. We have our fundraise, of course. We have services that we have coming, both services that we've launched that we're improving upon, and also new services that we're launching too. And then integrations after that. And so we are really heads down building to make a great user experience for all, but also just making the space safer.
When you landed the Forbes 30 on 30 list, I'm sure that has helped your company tremendously by the connections and just getting yourself in front of people. Did you ever think, how has that helped you? Actually, let me ask before I assume. Has that helped you? How has that affected your company?
I would say it definitely helped with validation. So first of all, getting the word out there. When I got on the list, it was very early within Webacy's days, like extremely early. So it kind of put us on the radar, which is great. Partnerships, there's an incredible founder ecosystem within the Forbes 30 under 30, of course. But also we can't forget that there's been many people listed on Forbes 30 under 30, which are now not so great in the spotlight. And so that's really important to know too, that this is Forbes is a company. And so it's not only great access and, way to showcase your company and what you're building, but it's also a networking option, right? And there are plenty of other networking options that are completely valid and useful too. And so it's been a very positive experience for me, but I know they've gotten a lot of flack for the people and what they've done since.
You mentioned networking. I think networking has helped me throughout all my life. If I didn't network, I always look back, when we talked about when we look back in our life, like the little decisions we make, little conversation you have, whatever with someone, and you're like, oh, wow, hit that person up and that person gives you a job and now it's your job, dream job, you never know. Talk about networking. How were you as a networker when you were younger, before you were a CEO, and how are you now? How are you looking at it now?
It's drastically different. So I'm pretty shy, just in general as a person. I'm an introvert that likes to talk to people. An extroverted introvert is, I think, the term that people say. But when I was young, the worst networker. I didn't understand the reason for it. I thought that I could do everything myself. I thought that was too shy to talk to everyone. And you quickly learn, being both in college and throughout your life, that people are everything, right? The connections we have with other people, the relationships that we build can change your life trajectory, like you just mentioned, right? So the people, like, for example, if I'm not a huge conference fan, but I go to them because I run a company, and I didn't realize that some of the connections I made from those conferences that I didn't want to go to ended up becoming huge partnerships for us as a company, right? And so it's about putting yourself up there, and I'm still working on it. But I've definitely improved, and I'm certainly wanting to improve more as the years go by.
For sure. You mentioned before, I take failure easily. Do you think that's a trait that's part of being a successful entrepreneur?
Absolutely. Yeah. You get rejected all the time. People tell you your stuff doesn't work. No one believes in you or thinks this way and that way, gives you all kinds of advice that counteracts with what you think. They come up naturally. So you kind of become thick-skinned to it, but it's also a good signal too. So be receptive to like feedback and comments are also part of it.
Besides your family, when you first described Webacy to someone, what did they say? What was the reaction? Do you remember who that person was?
My family has no idea what blockchain and crypto does. So.
Have you ever tried describing?
Yes, actually. Talking about Webacy to a lot of people, it clicks a lot, especially so crypto people get it right away, right? Yeah. If you talk to someone who holds crypto, you ask, okay, how are you protecting your crypto now? It's a great conversation. People who don't, I kind of take that digital identity angle because it's easier to explain. Because eventually, if blockchain continues to improve, a lot of what we own is going to actually be represented on chain. That's just a bullish statement that I have in my mind. But just taking that digital identity angle, like, oh, what about the assets you've created on Instagram, the content creators? People get that now. And so they get it and they see the value in it, which I think is a good sign of a product, is if people can understand it pretty easily.
So do you think crypto is kind of like ChatGPT? I say that because like back in, I don't know how long ago it was, a while ago, I think Microsoft came out with something that was kind of like ChatGPT, and then it failed because it was giving false information. And now ChatGPT is like the big thing, right? Do you think that the time where crypto came out, it was like we're missing that factor of people really recognizing what it is. It's just like how ChatGPT, like the technology, we know how important it is and it will be, but just people don't get it until someone uses it properly.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot with good technology, is that a technology comes out that the end people know is going to change the game, but until the big consumer applications are built for it, people don't see the long term. But that's happened with everything from the internet to email to just TV, right? Like people didn't really know and understand in the moment, but once the applications made more sense to the general public, that it really became ingrained in our society today. Like we couldn't think of a world where internet is not part of our lives anymore. I think the same is going to happen for crypto and AI. I mean, ChatGPT is wild. If you've probably played with it. I played with it a little bit, and I think we're still not where we were promised, right? We don't have these AI like people that actually represent human intelligence. Do we want that? Probably not. But we'll see as the years go by.
I think as an entrepreneur, especially a company like yours, where it's impacting people, was there ever a time, when was the time where you kind of came home after a long day of working on something and you were like, wow, I'm really doing it. This is going to be my life and I'm really doing it. When was that time where you just realized that this was going to be your journey?
I actually think it was when I left Microsoft. It happened very early. Because when I commit to something, I'm pretty committed to it. I don't really waver once I've decided, even if the decision takes a while. And so once the job ended with Microsoft, I felt very much in my soul that this could be like a 5 to 10 year journey that I embark on. It's very emotional, but extremely exciting too.
How has your team played a role in your success or journey to success? I think that picking the right team and having the right people around you is so important. Do you ever think about that before starting a company, that I need to surround myself with the right people in order for this to be successful? Or was it just something that naturally just happened?
I think the team is everything. I'm very impressed by solo founders. I don't know how they do it. I consider my whole team part of like the founding team because we're still so early and small. But they're incredibly impactful, right? Picking the right people can make or break the success of your company, and making sure that they balance your skill set is also super important. Because if you have two people who are really good at the same thing, it does not move the needle at all. And so I would say my team really balances out my weaknesses, and I think I do the same for them.
What is the most rewarding part of all this?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, one is seeing the impact that our products are already having, even with a small group of beta testers that we have. Which is actually not that small anymore. It's actually grown quite a bit in the last few months. Just seeing the feedback and the positivity and things like actually securing their assets in case that they might have gotten them lost. That kind of stuff is really, really valuable and fulfilling in the space, because that's exactly what we're building towards. And then the other thing is probably just seeing the being in the ecosystem itself. The amount of people that are building for a better future in a very positive way is extremely fulfilling. So that's less company related, but more industry related.
When you said you're in the pool of people with the entrepreneurs and networks, when you connect and talk to these people, how would you say you're different from everyone else? What really sets you apart as a CEO from the other people? Because I really do think you have a really interesting background, and I think that really shapes why you're successful and will be successful with the company moving forward. What really separates you when you speak to them?
All right, I appreciate that. There's a lot of diverse founders in this space, I have to say. I think maybe I don't necessarily come from a background of Silicon Valley. I'm not as plugged in and connected as some of these people are from the get-go. Even after going to Stanford, again, I was not the greatest networker in Stanford. And so my connections are mostly friends and classmates and teachers from there, not necessarily entrepreneurs that came out of Stanford or investors that came out of Stanford. And that's something I'm working on. But for me, I've met a lot of founders, especially the successful ones, that do seem to have that network edge or that ecosystem edge that I lack. But I think it could also be an opportunity for me to position myself differently, like you mentioned, because they're all swimming in the same pond, and maybe I'm bringing in a different part of the lake.
Were you a good student in school?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, people love the dropouts, but I finished all my assignments. I did everything on time. I didn't go to class. That's one thing I could probably bring up. But yes, I was a
Hey,
very
you
good
left
student.
Stanford for Cirque du Soleil. That's different.
I guess so. Yeah, good point.
What's the one job you think you would have been good at if you were not CEO of Webacy?
I think I'd be good at producing TV shows.
Oh,
It's very
okay.
random. I really love entertainment and media, hence Cirque du Soleil and hence so on. I've worked with a Japanese company to produce a series of entrepreneur and tech focused TV and so on. I really like it, and I think I'm pretty good at it too.
What message do you have for your future self?
Keep grinding.
Keep writing. Keep
I'd also
grinding.
say things like make sure you're getting enough sleep, drink a lot of water, all the good things.
Are you
But
getting enough sleep?
probably not. Are you? Is anyone?
I'm not a
No.
CEO of a company that's revolutionizing the way the world is gonna go. So I probably get a little more sleep than you do. Yeah.
Let's hope so. Yeah, I hope everyone is getting enough sleep. It's important. It's like the number one thing.
It is. And I love to end it on this question right here. Let's say we'll go back to high school, undergrad, and we're going to talk to Maika's favorite teacher, best friend. And I was like, hey, who is Maika? What would they say?
This is a tough question. Like high school era.
High school, undergrad, your best friend, your favorite teacher. I go to them and be like, hey, who was Maika? And what would they say?
They'd probably say something along the lines of, Maika is a very ambitious and driven girl who doesn't think there's anything in the way to stop her, which I think is still rings true today.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I want to really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. It really means a lot. I think you're doing some great, amazing things, and you're so young and you have so much more to go. And I cannot wait to see where Webacy goes. But before we go, do you have any messages or any last words for the audience?
Other than keep listening to this podcast, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for having me on the show. And other than that, if you want to stay up to date with me, you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram, and then Webacy if you own any crypto. And in the future, we'll expand into other digital assets as well. You can follow Webacy at webacy.com.
Actually, I want to talk to you about one thing since you brought Webacy. When I went on the website, one, I see that you're being very active on the blogs over there. So it looks like you've shifted your journey of your personal blogs to you're very active on there. And I also saw a podcast on there. Is that something that's in the works?
Something's always in the works.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on it. We do some Twitter Spaces here and there, which we may transition into podcasts. But the team has their top of mind items right now, and so we'll see. I think content's super important and education's super important. So we'll see if that comes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Maika.
Thank you.